Welcome to You Rise Me Up, a podcast about Asian Europeans from all walks of life. I'm your host, Ching, a German-born Chinese. Today I have with me my younger brother, Phil. So as some of you might know, I'm actually the second of 5 kids. I have an older brother, a younger brother, and 2 younger sisters. Since Saturday was Lunar New Year, which is all about family, I thought it would be fun to talk to my brother about our experiences and memories of growing up in Germany. Phil is probably the sibling that I have spent the most time with because he went to school a year early, so we were always in the same grade until we finished school. We then went on to quite different paths. Phil studied business in Mannheim and technology and innovation management in Bath. He then went on to work in strategy and data consulting at different companies before becoming a data and analytics governance manager at L'Oreal in Shanghai. I studied politics, philosophy, and economics in Manchester and global governance and diplomacy in Oxford. I then went on to work in the politics space in London and Beijing before becoming a software engineer and then a product manager and freelance journalist in Berlin. Nowadays, we probably see each other about once a year. So it's good to have you here, Phil.
Hi, it's good to see you, or good to hear you.
What was it like to always be the inferior sibling?
Huh? Bitch? Yeah?
Yeah? Tell us.
What? Come on, you
what was
lousy half-professional.
what was it like for you to grow up in Lyman? Because I have my memories of growing up in Lyman, right? And we also spent a lot of time together, but we never really talked about it growing up. And I don't know about you, but I still remember. I mean, I don't think that was necessarily like racism or anything, but I just remember that there was a Russian quarter in our town and that there were some boys who forced us to give up our seats when we were on the bus, like not always, but a couple of times. And that there were sometimes like people who tried to spit on our heads and stuff like that. And then like the usual comments like, oh, ni hao, or like, oh, Chinese, blah, 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 and some like slurs. But what was it like for you in your memory?
I think as a kid, both you and I think we sometimes got picked on because we look different and we sometimes behave differently. And we also have I think sometimes different values. So you get picked on. I think that's very natural if you're like one of the few Asian families in town. But then I think the good thing or the lucky thing about my situation is like I had very good friends who I think protected me. And I think I myself was also a pretty bulky and chubby kid, pretty tall for my age, especially like in elementary school. So I could always fight back. So that wasn't like too big of an issue for me. I think it did have a huge impact on me recently. So my time here in Shanghai, I just met a lot of ABCs. So a lot of people with a Chinese ethnicity but born abroad who had like a much larger Asian communities. And I think it was quite valuable for the development of their identity. I just see a lot of those ABCs who then have more ABC friends. It's usually very strong bonds. And they were able to combine very cool aspects of the Chinese versus the new home country culture. And I think this is something we lacked, and this is something I only adopted once I came here to Shanghai. When you grow up like us in a small German town that is predominantly white, and other communities are very large but very separate, like the Russian community or the Turkish community, I think it's very challenging for us as like one of the few families, or maybe the only Asian family, to then as children, right, where you are very easily influenced by other cultures, by other people, to then develop something that beautifully combines your original culture with the new culture. And you know that I, as a child, I used to have a lot of Turkish friends, right?
Yes, you did.
And also a lot of Russian friends. So it's kind of like, okay, the foreigners get together. So I also had German friends. But then I think the result of this is that we are true bananas. Like we're white inside and yellow outside, like truly.
But would you really say that? I think one of our Chinese teachers, she was the first one who said that to us, like, oh, you're bananas, And at the time, I was like, there is a point to it, apart from the fact that it's technically a little bit racist to call us yellow, right? But then thinking about it, I think maybe back then I would have said yes because of the lack of Asian influences. I think I was rather German in some ways, like at least like outside of our family. But later on, I think it has become more of a more of a brownish texture, in the sense of once I moved to Beijing, for example, I feel like I started embracing the Chinese side of me, more like our cultural heritage. And I started noticing things that I would do or that our parents or grandparents would do that I was not really aware of. And I think from that point on, I also leaned into that side more and became more of a blend of like different cultures. And nowadays, I wouldn't even necessarily call myself German anymore. Like, I mean, culturally speaking, at least, I feel like I've become such a blend of different cultures that if someone asked me, oh, where are you from? I would say, like, I'm from Germany and I was born and grew up there. But if someone says, like, oh, how would you describe your cultural identity? I would probably say, like, it's more like a blend of different cultures. That's why I like to say, like, oh, I'm Asian European or German Chinese instead of just naming one or the other.
But this is only because you went to Beijing, right? So what we're talking about here right now is like your childhood. So when we were younger, we were really German. It's not a bad thing. It's just given the surrounding, right? Us speaking German every day, us getting a German education, it just makes us like bananas, right?
Yeah. But like, how did you feel? I mean, do you also have a lot of memories of people always like calling you Chinese or being the Chinese kid and so on? Because I don't actually know if your teachers did the same, but I definitely had some teachers who were like, oh, the Chinese, and stuff like that. And obviously, you have a Western name, I have like a Chinese name. So people would constantly mispronounce my name and so on. So it was very, very obvious to me that I was different in one shape or form. But what was your experience actually like? Did you actually think about it a lot or did you just like ignore it?
Yeah, definitely. It's just very natural. If you're like us, like one of the few families who look completely different. And I told our cousin something similar very recently. His child is about to enter primary school. So I told him, like, I think you just got to be prepared that your child will be bullied. I think this is just part of the game. Like, if you want to make it as a family with a different ethnical background in the country, I think it's just natural. And I mean, like, I feel like kids, especially, are brutal. They always tell you the truth, right? They sometimes ask like really, really mean questions and do really mean stuff. And I think this is just part of the game. But I think I, for example, had like good friends who always defended me. And then I also I was a pretty big child, so I could defend myself in various ways. And then later on, I think it also helps if you're academically very stellar. You earn respect because in this system, it's about grades, right? So if you have good grades, you earn the respect of the teacher and I think of many fellow students. And then I think another criteria I think is also sports. It's good if you are good in certain sports. I think so. That's I think the combo that I think made you and I survive pretty well.
Yeah, we for sure did. But later on, I also thought about it. And I think we were actually also lucky in the sense that, some people who are good at school, they get bullied because they are good at school, but we didn't. Like, actually, we earned some respect because of it. But I think that was also because we had some people pleasing tendencies where we would always help people. I mean, helping people in and of itself is not necessarily people pleasing, but I distinctly remember some cases where, like I helped people and then there were instances where people would basically use my work as if it was theirs and get like the praise for it and stuff like that, which I found quite awkward. But then I would also not say anything because I didn't want to, like cause trouble, which I found very awkward. And also, I sometimes felt like there was also a lot of pressure attached to being good at school. Like, I generally enjoyed like learning about new things and was curious about a lot of subjects. And I also didn't feel like we had that traditional pressure from home. I didn't feel like mom or dad or grandma, grandpa that they pushed us like some other Asian kids, they never said like, oh, you have to get good grades. I just remember mom telling me at one point, like, oh, we never had the opportunity to excel academically because we always had to work. We just want you to take this opportunity and make of it what you want. And it's like your choice and your decision, which also gave me like a sense of ownership. But at the same time, sometimes it made me feel like, oh, like this is the way to like be accepted by society, and that also came with a certain kind of pressure. I often felt like I had to be like great at things to be liked and respected, but I don't know if you also felt the same way.
So I didn't feel this way. You know me. There were many years where I was really bad in school. So when I was in elementary school or like in gymnasium, like in the 5th and 6th grade, I think I wasn't a great student. I entirely relied on my sister to make it through these years. For example, what she would do is like she would help me with my math homework, and I was really bad at it. I still remember like I was really really bad at it.
True, yeah.
And my sister here, she was very very impatient with my level of dumbness. She just couldn't stand it.
Oh my gosh.
I remember we were sitting there in like we had like a room for doing homework, right?
Ah, true.
And then we would sit next to each other, and I would usually just wait for Qing to finish her homework until she can help me with mine.
True. When we were younger, our grandma was like quite strict, so we had to do our homework right after school. And Phil, I mean, you were also a year younger than me. You went to school early. Our parents didn't want to send me to school early because my kindergarten teacher was like, she's so quiet and shy. We don't think she will make it if you send her to school early. So I stayed in school until I was like 6. And Phil went to school early because he seemed ready for it. And he was also a big guy at the time. And surprisingly, he was not very good at school, and it took him some time to get the concepts and so on. And yeah, I don't think I was very patient because I was like, oh my gosh, I got to do my homework, and now I need to show this kid how to do his homework. And he just made it to the gymnasium. So that is the school you go to in Germany if you want to go to university. But then at one point, you befriended the smartest kids in your class, and your grades just went from like barely making it to like being among the top of the year, right?
So I tell you how I see it. I tell you the smart but unconscious choice I made. I hung out with the right people who helped me a lot in getting better in school and focusing on the right things. So this is why I feel like, especially as a kid, it's so crucial to pick the right friends. I think something else I wanted to mention is I believe we were kind of people pleasers, or at least we were like very nice towards the majority of people. And I think it's because it's part of the Chinese culture. I feel like in Chinese culture, people usually prefer to avoid like open conflict. So it's usually quite subtle or like behind the scenes. So I think this is something that we subconsciously did, or we kind of got inherited, I think. And this certainly helps. But I think what also helps, like, okay, we have a lot of siblings, right?
Yeah.
So, and we all went to the same school. So I think that definitely helps. Like if, for example, your brother did a good job and then you come next, you already get some recognition for it. You're like, oh, you're part of the family, right? Oh, you must be good too.
Yeah. Well,
Also, let me add one more point. I think it's also because I think we went into a good town. Like the students we met in the school, I think they were fairly humane. Like I've heard stories of like I tell you it's the truth. Like I have met like friends who went to schools, and I tell you it's like the wild wild west. I tell you it's like so crazy in terms of like fist fights and stuff like this, like really brutal and much more horrifying. And I think compared to this, like I think we went into like a into the German suburbs, a lot of decent families. So I think overall it also helped us to not get into like really big trouble. And I think Germans usually are also pretty hardworking, right? And I think decent.
yeah.
I think there are other cultures where, for example, it's just part of the culture where more people smoke. A lot of children already start smoking at an early age and stuff like that. So I think it's a combination of these factors that definitely also helped us.
Yeah, that's true. But then I also think it's because we generally stayed away from these groups that were particularly radical or like did illegal stuff. Because I've certainly heard of and also seen people do stuff that is also questionable. But I think you're right. Like, I mean, overall, I think it could have been worse for sure. But whenever I think of Leimen or Sandhausen, I still think a little bit of like not like ghetto, but I mean, also not like, not the best environment. But I guess it comes with certain lessons and experiences. But then, Phil, I was actually wondering as well, you already described this like tendency to help people and these people-pleasing tendencies as rather Chinese, or the conflict avoidance. But what Chinese cultural practices that we actually follow? Because, for example, Spring Festival, right? It wasn't until I moved to Beijing that I realized how important it was to Chinese people, because we never celebrated it. And I don't recall ever having like celebrated Chinese New Year with our family, you know?
So my view on this is like So basically, Spring Festival is about like the family coming together, right? Like 20.
Yeah.
So I feel like we basically did the same, but during Christmas, just because it's more convenient and because our parents had to work most days, right?
Yeah.
I believe our parents were like less strict on like conveying these important festivals and so on. But I think what we did do is like we adopted certain values I think that are very important, and the festival I think is only the result of these values. And I think one of them is like the love and respect you show towards your family, kind of like family above all, right?
Yeah.
So like for example, we would never address our parents or grandparents by their first name. The how much like, okay, your parents, they show love in a different way, for example, by how hard they work to offer you like a very high living standard to make your life in the future basically easier. And then also like, for example, how our grandparents stayed in Germany for us for like decades, even though they cannot speak the language, just taking care of us, right? This was their sole life mission for these years.
Yeah.
And I think this is very Chinese, I think. Like, it's a very traditional way of doing it. Like, the parents go to work and the grandparents stay at home to take care of your kids. So, this, I think, is definitely an aspect.
Yeah, definitely. But I actually also talked to mom about it at one point about like the fact that, for example, some people told me that their parents would pack them very traditional food and that they would get like weird looks or weird questions because of that and so on. And that we actually never had that. And initially I thought, oh, that is probably because there were no Asians in town. We didn't have like an Asian supermarket nearby and stuff like that. But then mom also pointed out the fact that it's probably also because our grandparents have actually been in Europe for a long time. Like our parents, they moved to the Netherlands like from China when they were like 6 or 7, so kids themselves, right? And are overall like quite westernized in their ways. So I think that might play a role as well. It's just that for some families it happens faster, but for our family, I think it took a little bit longer generationally to get to a level where we all have a university education and so on. But I think culturally speaking, our family is more westernized in our like cultural practices than like some other families.
Yeah, definitely. So, I think depending on who you talk to, they would consider us, so you and me, as like the second or third generation of immigrants. So, the special case in our family is like our grandparents already emigrated to Europe, but mom and dad were not born here, right?
Yeah.
So this is like kind of a tricky situation, but I totally agree that this is like, I think also the cause of why we have like more Western influences.
Yeah.
And that I think also makes us quite unique. I think it's true. Like you only meet like a lot of families, either, they're like the second generation. So the parents moved to like England or somewhere, or it's like the true third generation, right? So even the parents were born in Germany, for example.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I told mom that I created this podcast because I want like other generations and future generations, especially like our nieces and nephews, to grow up having an easier time finding role models and listening to these stories and feeling a sense of like connection, even if they grow up in a town where there are not a lot of Asians as they currently are. But then mom was like, oh, I don't think that it will be the same once they get to our age. I think that it will be completely different. But I don't actually think so because, as you said, we are actually technically already the second or like almost third generation. I would say 2.5 or something like that. But it was the same for us, right? I think it very much depends on the environment you grow up in. If you grow up in an environment where there are like more people that have similar experiences, then you might grow up with a different mindset, but I think they will probably have similar experiences because one of our cousins, he already told me that there was a kid who was looking at one of our nephews and said like, oh, he looks weird and stuff like that. I mean, he didn't mean it in a bad way, of course, but that actually reminded me of our childhood and how, people would also sometimes look at us. And I think it will take some time, especially since Germany is a little bit slow in adapting to this.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So society will definitely change, but I think certain life principles always stay the same. In German, you call it Urprinzipien. You know?
Yeah.
I don't know how you call it in English, like
The core principles.
yeah, I mean, there's a reason why they say like, okay, history repeats itself.
Yeah.
I think there are always certain criteria that will never disappear. It's just part of the human race. So I think it definitely creates value. It's just like, I think future generations or like, for example, our nephews, they just need to, listen carefully and extract the right conclusions for themselves out of this podcast.
Yeah. I was gonna ask you as well, Phil, I mean, we've talked about our Chinese parts, but then what would you say is the most German thing about you? And would you call yourself German, or like how do you define your cultural identity?
I think I'm a blend of German and Chinese, just given the time I've spent here in China. The most German aspect. But I think something that I would not even call German, but I think it's a clear Western influence is like the way I see life. If you grew up here in China, you would know that there's a very standard life path that people expect from you. You go to school, you go to university, it needs to be very prestigious. Then you get a really good job, you earn a lot of money, then you get married, get children, you maybe live together with your parents. This is considered like a good life path. And everything that deviates from this life path, in many cases, it's considered like, not a good child. Unless you, in the end, still manage to complete these criteria. You earn enough money, you have a stable family, you have kids, stuff like that. And I think something where we got a lot of Western influences, like to say, like, okay, there's a much larger variety of what is considered a healthy, successful, meaningful life path. And I think this is something I live by, just given also the recent decisions I've made in life.
Do you want to talk about the recent decisions you've made in life?
Yeah, I've decided to quit my job, a well-paying job. And I think if I talk to certain friends and also more local friends, I think for many people, it's not so easy to understand. But then I think this is where I think I definitely also got the Western influence to say, okay, I just want to do this because I feel like this is the right thing for me. I live the life for myself. I'm not living it to live up to a certain image, or I don't care what the public is thinking. It's more about reaching my full potential, realizing myself, finding myself. And I think at this point of time, it's really crucial for me.
And how do you feel about it right now? Do you feel relieved? Do you feel anxious? Do you feel like worried? Or how do you feel?
I think I feel excited and frightened at the same time. I think exciting is, I've never done something like this. I worked the whole time. I think I was pretty diligent. And now I intend to take a longer time period off, but I haven't figured out the whole plan yet. So the crazy thing I've done is like, okay, I haven't planned out anything. I just knew, okay, I don't want to continue anymore. So I first make a hard stop. So I really make like a 180-degree turn. And then I slowly figure out what I do next. So that's the exciting part. There's a lot of potential. Now, the frightening or challenging part here is like, okay, it's easy to get frightened by the thought like, okay, I don't have like a stable income stream anymore. I don't have this routinized life anymore. I'm intending to also switch my location. So I'm changing basically all the factors I'm used to, the social environment, where I live, my work. And I think I'm changing a lot of factors at the same time. So if I'm not careful, it's easy to get lost in them or to get paralyzed because it's too much change. I'm too far out of my comfort zone. So this is why these days I'm spending a lot of thoughts on like, okay, how can I best ensure that I do this in the most meaningful way, being more daring, doing things I always wanted to do without falling into this trap of like being paralyzed by the level of uncertainty I'm about to embrace.
Yeah, lucky for you, you have a sister who already did it twice and fell on her face quite a few times. So you know that you can call me anytime.
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
No, but I asked you intentionally how you were feeling because I also did the same before. Like, I mean, I quit my job in like early 2020 in the politics space in London. And then I wanted to go traveling first, but then the pandemic hit. And then I ended up at home teaching myself how to code and stuff like that. I mean, talking about it now, and also like when people ask me about it at interviews or in my personal life, I usually give them the short version, which sounds very straightforward, right? But I also have to say, and I think it is important to emphasize that it is perfectly normal to feel lost every now and then, but also to feel like a failure in between when you are making a big change or transition, because that's like how I felt in between. I felt a lot of emotional pressure. But I think what you are doing better than me is that you are actually taking the time. Well, you are also not being blocked by a pandemic, but what I think you're doing better now is to actually take the time to take some time off. And I really hope that you do that, because I just kept trying to solve things and trying to work. And I felt like, looking back, even though I had these quote unquote breaks, I felt like I was always working in one shape or form, you know? So I think it's really good that you're taking the time to like travel, to reflect, and to think about what is really important to you and what isn't.
thanks.
No, Phil, but are there any like particular memories from our childhood or from our time together that have shaped you?
Actually, I think it's a really nice thing. We were always in the same grade, so we had a similar like friend circle, similar topics to talk about, which I think adds on our bond and our relationship, right?
Yeah.
So I think this is something really cool to have, like a sibling who's in the same grade but in a different class. To then see like, okay, hey, you might learn the same topics, but then in a completely different way. And also, like, I think just given the number of siblings we are, just given the time constraints that mom and dad had, we always did, for example, the same hobbies, right? Tennis, piano, and so on. You have more commonalities, like more things you do together, you have in common. You can share learnings, you can share the pain, you can discuss topics together. I think that helps a lot. And then also, like, okay, you for example, we used to play street hockey together. We would go to friends' gatherings together. There was a lot of stuff we actually did together, and I think it's pretty helpful and pretty. I liked it. I liked it a lot. I think it was something I look back on like fondly.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it was nice. I also remember we used to celebrate our birthdays together, and your friends were my friends, and my friends were your friends to an extent. I think that was definitely super nice, actually. Yeah, we did a lot of things until we moved out of the house and went to different countries. But I'm also curious, how did you think about like the fact that, our parents, like you said, mom and dad, they were always like busy and we only really saw them on Saturdays. Did that affect you in any way?
Definitely. So I think you and I, we always knew like, okay, our parents are not here because they're working really hard for us, which I think we can nowadays appreciate quite a lot.
Yeah.
But then I think back in the days, for me, it was always the saddest when there were like these school gatherings, when all the families would like go together on a trip or meet together or go on a picnic or do something simple. And then it would always be us who were like just sitting there alone, like no one prepared like the nice, they had like the nicest stuff, like, the favorite
Yeah.
food of the child, like
Yeah.
super, like all the equipment you need to have like a nice picnic. And we come with like a plastic bag,
Yeah.
like a roll of like Aldi cookies. We forgot half the stuff, and
Yeah.
then we are just borrowing stuff from other families,
Yeah.
or we are just like straight away, sitting with our best friend's family, right?
Yeah.
But then it doesn't feel the same. Or you have like a school performance, like back in the days, I used to be part of this school choir before my voice changed, and
Yeah.
I had a performance, right? But then mom and dad could not make it. And it's like other stuff like this. And then you just get compliments from like other people, but it doesn't mean the same to you, right? It doesn't mean as much, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is something that to this day, I think if I would ever become a dad, I think I would want to attend these events. I think it's very, very important. I think it means a lot, I think, for a child if the parents like show up. But I totally understand why they weren't there. But I think it's still something I look back at and I'm saying, okay, hey, it was not easy, huh? I think in the development. And then I think it's also like, okay, what they say about the middle child. I think sometimes it's true. Like you get a bit neglected if you're in the middle and you have like siblings who are older, right?
Yeah.
And siblings who are younger, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just, yeah, it's just how it is. And I think I was pretty okay by myself. Like in the end, I turned out fine. I think that's true, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I remember that I would sometimes feel sad when I went to a friend's house and I would see a very traditional family in the sense that, their parents both had like a job that would allow them to spend time with their children, prepare like lunch or like dinner, and where the whole family would like sit there like for lunch, like the mom, the dad, and the children, because I always thought like we don't really have that. During the time that our parents had a restaurant, we rarely ever had like lunch or dinner together. They would always leave for work when we were in school and come back when we were already asleep. And we would always have lunch and dinner among each other, or like, I mean, with our grandparents because they prepared the food, and like Momo, right? Like our ayi or nanny. Yeah. And I really missed that actually, just having a meal and so on. And nowadays, now that our parents don't have the restaurant anymore, like one of the things that I really, really appreciate is when we have breakfast together or when we have like lunch or dinner together, because we eat together much more often now. And I also noticed that, living by myself in Berlin now, I love eating with other people, like with people that mean something to me. I love going for food with them. And I really, really appreciate it whenever we as a family get together during Christmas or New Year's. That makes me really happy. And I don't even need to be doing a lot, but I just really like it when It's like all of us.
So I think something that is even more crucial is like because our parents didn't have so much time, they couldn't pass on a lot of their life principles or viewpoints to us.
So true.
It has certain benefits, but also a lot of drawbacks. When I then sit on a table with my best friends, right, and the whole family's there, the parents would try to give them certain life lessons or to educate them on certain topics. And I think it's easier to be passed on by the parents because the grandparents are like 2 generations away from what is happening in nowadays society. I think this is something that I think all of us struggled with quite a bit.
Yeah.
Like we didn't get it passed on, so we had to get it from somewhere else. We either got it from like outside or we tried to develop it by ourselves. I think the good thing is like that all of us, we read a lot. And I think we read good books, right?
Yeah.
Which I think helped. And we also had like good friends and so on. But it can also go like the completely opposite way. It can go really bad. And I think there was a time period in my life where I went into this direction because I had the wrong friends. So this is, I think, something really dangerous. And my personal view is like it's better if the parents can make more time to pass on certain life lessons. And I think this is something I, for example, recently talked with the mom and dad about this, and they totally agree that this is something they missed out on, and this is something quite important, I think, in like how confident a child is, right?
Yeah.
How much life direction they have, and how much they know, like, okay, this is my identity. Because children, they imitate, and usually they imitate from their parents. But if these figures are taken away from you for certain reasons, you need to get it from somewhere else, or there's like a certain hole you need to fill by yourself, and it just takes more time.
Yeah.
And I think if there's something in the podcast I mentioned, I think this is something very, very crucial, I think.
Yeah. It's so true. I mean, obviously, with granny and grandpa, we were restricted in our language abilities because we speak a very specific dialect that is not Mandarin. And we never learned to use that language beyond the vocabulary that we used within the household, like, oh, I'm hungry, or like, what's for dinner. And then when it comes to asking our parents, first of all, they were not there most of the time. But then I felt like when it came to the really important decisions, like sometimes I would ask mom in particular, and she would say, oh, I wish I could help you, but I just don't know how. And I think that became worse, once I started university, because our parents didn't go to university. And I felt like the gap between our parents and us, like the way we thought, that it changed once we started university and started questioning a lot of concepts and the way we grew up and so on.
I think you need to think in terms of generations. So if the past generation was not as educated as the current generation, or like if you're in the same generation and there's one family who's like just more educated than you, right, or had like a head start of like 80 years more plus, this is where the gap becomes obvious, and this is just a natural thing. And I think this is how society is built, right? It's just part of the game.
Yeah, it is, but it's still sad, because we already received so little guidance from our parents. And then the gap became even wider once we went to university. And I think like now that we're getting older and our parents are getting older, we are able to talk about more things. And I also feel like our parents are quite receptive to new concepts and ideas. Because I feel like when I sit down and really talk to mom about the way that I think and like why I disagree with her on certain topics, I mean, it takes some time. Like sometimes it takes several conversations, but I feel like she is taking it in and that her behavior towards certain topics has changed a little bit.
So I think something in recent years, I've done a lot, like in the past 10 years, I think is I try to think more and more about the bigger picture. I think in my personal views, like in a lot of topics, I think we think too narrow-minded. Like we think like, oh, this is something that only I have experienced. We stay an individual. We think that, okay, hey, this problem is so unique to us. But then I feel like a lot of these problems, they're actually like, a lot of people encounter them and they're actually linked to much larger problems or larger challenges. And I think this is something I am still dealing with nowadays. Like it has cost me way too much time to solve some of these problems, or to like at least get a direction or like a view on it.
Okay, so based on everything that we've just talked about, what advice would you give your younger self?
Learn to love yourself. Don't overthink. Anything is a learning experience. Be bolder and more courageous. Hang out with the right people.
Okay, then thank you for taking part in the podcast, Phil. I mean, you're my brother, so we'll be in touch.
You owe me money.
What? You owe me money?
My hourly rate? Can you afford my hourly rate? You bitch.
Phil. Anyways,
that's why I didn't say
nothing.
Like sign the papers. I own the copyright. Thank you for having me.
We'll be in touch.
I hope we are not in touch anymore.
Oh, Phil!
Yeah?
Yeah, okay. Bye.
Thank you for having me. I'll send you the bill by email.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
So yeah, that's my brother, Phil. And if you're a listener and enjoyed this episode, as always, I would really appreciate it if you could take the time to rate this podcast or write a review on whatever platform you're listening on. That would be a great help. Thank you.